Hello everybody, Michael here for Tactica Imperialis with a painting and modelling video. Today is going to be a short painting tutorial for an Ork Shoota Boy. Now, I will put a disclaimer here that this is not going to be a pro painting type of tutorial. This is going to be getting basic guys up to a usable standard in a relatively short amount of time. So this is the Shoota Boy that I use as my test model, and I've also got a couple more guys painted up, and this is the colour scheme we're going to be using. There's not much difficulty in doing it, so I recommend this for beginners to people just starting to experiment with painting at a higher level, because if you're a pro painter you'd be doing this in your sleep. So that's our test model, and the model we're going to do today is going to be this one. Now you might be asking, where are the rest of the parts? Well, Orks, as you might have noticed with Shoota Boys, have the arm strewn across the chest, meaning that painting the chest area would be absolutely impossible. The reason the head is also off is to prevent the gun from becoming obstructed when you glue it on, because sometimes the head can actually block the gun when you're gluing it on, which is an absolute pain in the rear end, which is why there is no head attached, there's no arms attached, and I'll be painting those components on the frame. The frames are just down there for anybody who's wondering, and then we'll also be painting the base, and I'll try and give you a bit of painting advice as we go. So I'm going to try and do this as a live tutorial, sit and paint, rather than a step-by-step guide, and then maybe you'll pick something up along the way. So I'm going to set the camera up, and then I'm going to get painting. Hope you enjoy this video. Let's go.
Alright, here goes nothing. So, we're going to start with this model by painting probably the most predominant part of the model, and that is the trousers. Now, you might be surprised why I'm not starting with the metals, with the skin. The reason I'm not starting with the skin is probably because there's only a tiny amount on the torso of models. It's ridiculous how little there actually is. So I'm going to start with the leather on the trousers, because I'm going to do a two-tone brown. Now for the legs, I'm going to do a dark brown, which is a very old paint if I just find it. Still one of the old square Citadel parts. I wonder how many people remember them. And the paint we're using, dark flesh. I will put a colour conversion chart in the description, so as you can find what paint you are actually using, because I'm conscious of the fact that Citadel have updated their paint since. Right, let us begin. Okay, make sure you get a good amount of paint on your brush. It's kind of standard. The only time I would advise against doing that is dry brushing. Right, here we go. Now you're allowed, this is my sort of rule because I'm a messy painter, on your first couple of steps, or your first couple of areas that you work on, you're allowed to make a little bit of a mess. Not much of a mess, but you're allowed to go into other areas for the simple reason that if you are too careful, then you'll end up taking absolutely hours. And to be fair, with most Citadel paints, you can just paint back over the bits you messed up. Right, let's keep going. Sorry, I'm aware that my camera angle skills are not the best. I've not done painting tutorials before. The one thing I will say though is when you're doing these early steps, make sure to get absolutely everything. This is why I don't care about going over the edge. As long as I get everything, absolutely everything on that component painted, then I don't have to go back and do that step again. Just a time-saving thing, really. I don't think it's helping that I'm left-handed, actually. The fact that I'm left-handed might be working against me here. Right, here we go. Getting there. Check behind. Alright, I think we just about, nope, almost got it. Another tip, just a thing, is don't overload your brush. It might be tempting to just, to make sure you get all of it done in one go, you just stick the brush right in there. And to be honest, I used to do that because I thought it would work really well. The issue comes if you go too far down and you get the paint on the silver, as I believe it's called the ferrule, don't quote me on that, is that you can really damage the brush. Might even cause the bristles to separate, which is a real pain in the butt. Okay, so we've got that. Make sure to push your paint until it clicks. And the next piece of advice I'll have done every painter is one of these things. Water pots. Absolutely need them. Just excuse me one moment. Yeah, a water pot is an absolutely essential thing. because without it, you're going to be making runs to and from your sink or wherever else you use to wash your brushes, and that nobody ain't got time for that. So one thing I will say is don't leave your paintbrush sat in the water pot for too long. By too long, I do mean like overnight, but don't, like, if you stop painting during an evening session, you go down to, let's say, have some dinner, watch some telly, whatever, don't leave your paintbrush sat in the pot, because, as I found out, this can happen. This is partly a combination of the water and the paint overspill that I mentioned earlier. That brush has no bristles on it anymore. And that's not a good thing. So don't let that happen. Make sure to always take your brush out. And a tip with drying it, the first thing I usually do is just shake the water off. But if you haven't got a cloth to hand, one little trick I found is if you get this little gap in your palm, what I'll do is there's a little hole in your palm right there, and if you twist the brush as you take it out, it actually straightens the bristles out really well. So that's what that does. Right. So with that done, we're going to move on to the torso, by which I mean his shirt. And as you may have noticed already on some of these guys, I've been using a purple shirt. Mainly because I've been using a two-part scheme for my boys, where shooters wear purple, sluggers wear orange. Don't ask me why, that's just the colour scheme I chose. And the paint I'm going to be using, Liche Purple. Again, I know it's been updated, and I will put the conversion in the description. You still need to be slightly precise, but you can be a little less precise than you might need to be, because, again, you're not working in an area next to where you were before, because there is a belt area in between the shirt and the trousers, and just make sure the paint dries before you move on to the next step, otherwise you will get paint on you. Right, here we go. I find it helps a lot to have your hand resting on something, because it holds the model a lot steadier. Right, I'm just going to slide this over a little. Right, and we're off and running. Again, I'm not being too cautious about going on to other stages. I know purple is a dark tone. Liche Purple particularly is one of the darkest purples that used to be in the Citadel range, but you don't have to be super precision. Right, there we go. Need to go a bit deeper than I expected. So what we're going to be doing once we get past this stage, the main thing that's the more advanced technique is doing the skin, because that's a two-part job. It's even a three-part job, which I know seems a little bit much for a very, very basic paint scheme to do a three-part job, but you can do it in two parts. I'm just going to do this model in three, just so you can get an idea of what you're working with. Now, one thing you're going to have to be super careful, and this is the only time where precision is required, is around here, here, and here. For one reason. Plastic glue, basically the GW plastic glue, not that I'm using it, fuses the plastic together. That's why the bond is so strong. And it will not fuse them half as well when there's paint in the way. So try as best you can to not get paint, like I did, like a derp, on the joints. One way to avoid this is by using masking tape or blue tack, put it on there, get it in the way, that way it's far less likely you're going to actually do any damage. It's just something you've got to be considerate of. And when we do the head, or his neck, for the skin, I will be not painting right up to the edge so as the glue makes a better bond. I don't think my glue cares about paint in the way, because I don't use GW glue, but it's something to be conscious of with most of your models. Now, the next thing we need to do is check for the arms to make sure that they don't need any bits doing on them. Now, the arm I'm going to be using today, because this model is leaning excuse me, with his right foot forward, I'm going to be using the one left-handed gun in the box, which is, if I can find it, this one up here. And if I just pull it away a little bit, as you can see looking at it, there is no wristband, there's no anything on the gun that means that you need to use any, what's the word I'm looking for? Any of the cloth colours on it, because it's just pure skin. And the same applies to the right hand down here. It does not have any cloth on it. I know it's not great focus from the camera, but it doesn't have any on, so we're going to skip that step. And the last part to do is to check the head. And the head I'm going to be using is this one down here, with the furred cap. And again, it's just skin, armour, and that fur around the top. So we don't need to do anything on that. So we have finished that stage. Just make sure to check at the end of every stage. And also, Citadel paint pots these days sometimes are very annoying to shut. And so you've got to make sure that you give them a proper push down, because at the back, I'm trying to see if I've got a paint pot that's like that as an example. No, I've sealed all of my paints reasonably well, but sometimes the back end of the pot, sort of back here, doesn't always sit flush, and you've got to push it again to make sure it goes down. It's a minor thing, but if you don't remember to do it, you may end up with your paint going watery or going dry. It shouldn't happen, but it might. Right. Oops. There we go. Okay, so with that done, I'm going to wash the brush. Wipe the excess, shake off the rest, and then straighten it out using the palm trick I mentioned earlier. Okay, that didn't work. Sorry, apologies about that. Just stuck my hand in the camera for no reason. Right. Oops. I meant to paint the little tabard in purple as well, but I'll do that in the red armor colour instead. Right. Next stage is going to be the other brown. Now, this is going to work on all the straps, as well as on the belt, and there's a couple on the boot as well. So that's going to be all of this area. Now this, you might be thinking this is armour, but looking at the way it's shaped, how it's stapled in and it's got cracks like that, I think that's actually leather. And so I'm going to be using it in the brown colour. Same with these two straps that work around his back. Same with the belt along here. And I'm also going to do the boots in that colour. Now the reason I'm going to do the boots in that colour is because I don't have a black paint. I apologise about that. But it's something I don't have, and to be honest, you might be asking why haven't I done an undercoat, but it's just something I don't see the need for. Particularly when you're doing models en masse, undercoating can just slow the whole thing down. And so I've stopped undercoating a long time ago. On character models, I can understand maybe you want to do undercoats, but I don't really think you need to. Right, anyway, I'm going to stop talking, and this is going to be a new paint. It's called Steel Legion Drab. Now this is one of the new Citadel range, and it replaced, for those who are still on the old paints, Calthan Brown. And it's a really good paint. It's a nice light brown, contrasts well with a lot of things, and it's just generally really useful. So I'm going to start by doing his base. Now why start with the base? Because the base is going to be sat on the floor and it needs to dry. And I've found many a time when doing bases is that this area gets paint on it. And when that gets paint on it, it marks your surface, and that's a pain. So that's why I paint the base first. It does mean you have to be careful when you're painting the rest of the area of the model, not to put your hand on the base because it's drying. Some would say do the base last, and honestly I can understand why, but I don't think you need to, for the simple reason of, well, when you've got the paint open, why waste it? La-da-dee, la-da-dum, ow. Sorry, my arm's going a little bit stiff from the angles that I'm working at. It's just annoying, but that's me being left-handed. That's not your fault, that's my fault. I'm going to see if I can move around. Maybe I'll get a better look at this. Okay. Are we still on screen? Yes, we are. Alright. Here we go. So, we're going to do the shoes, because we're going to work up, because I need to be holding lower areas of the model in order to paint the straps up at the top. And so, I'm going to start at the bottom and then work up. I'm going to be honest, this entire model is basically one coat of stuff and then you're done. But to be honest, even that can make models look half decent. I mean, I know this test model was hardly Golden Demon standard, but it's presentable and it doesn't look that bad. Right, I'm going to switch hands. I can't switch hands there. Okay, I'm just going to stand up. If my voice goes a little bit weird, I apologise for that, but I prefer to work when I'm stood up. Or at least when I'm working at an angle, I prefer to have the model underneath me. You know what I mean? Right. So, we're going to be careful how we hold this. And just check that we're still on the screen. Yes, we are. Problem is, my body then shades the whole blooming thing. Alright. Okay. We still need to have a lot to learn about how to paint for cameras. Okay. Apologies everyone for the jump cut. I was realising that that angle was really not working for me because I can't stand up to paint at that angle, and also I was really struggling to get my arm to hold it without my arm getting really, really stiff. So I switched it around. Hopefully me being left-handed allows this camera angle to work a little better. You didn't really miss much. All I did was I finished off the brown, so the base is now done. I had to redo that because I got my hands all over it. The leather strappings on his front, on his back, and also the belt. And my hands providing a ton of shade. So there you go, that's where we're at now, and we're going to move on to the green, the most iconic part of an orc, the skin. The paint we're going to use, Dark Angel's Green. Another really old paint, hasn't let me down yet. So, this is going to be more focused on doing the stuff on the frame than it is going to be doing stuff on the model, because as I mentioned earlier, there's not much flesh on the actual orc body. So we've got the neck area, which we're going to be doing. And then there's a little bit underneath the joint for his arm, which we can do. And there's a little bit under this arm, and that's it. That's all you can actually do on the orc body. The rest of it is on the arms and on the head. Because despite the fact that orcs don't wear much armour, they do wear a lot of clothes. Right. I'm just going to be conscious that I'm putting the model in shade every time I move. So, let's do that, and hopefully we can see what we're doing. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we've got to be careful about the joints, and the head is one such joint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint around this segment here. I'm going to paint in this top area and all around it, but I'm actually not going to paint the joint itself for the simple reason of, well, for you guys it would be making sure the glue bonds properly. For me, I don't see the need to do it, and it would probably also help my glue. And there we go, we've just gone around there, easy peasy. It doesn't need to do much because the head goes quite a bit ways back, but that's just making sure that every area is covered, because once the head's on, getting your paintbrush in here to do it, you just won't. So I'm going to do these two little joints. Now, I debate whether to do these areas as skin or as cloth. I choose to do them as skin, because the simple reason the cloth goes around there, and then there's a little bit of area where you can get the flesh in, plus it's not modelled quite like the cloth is, so I've decided to do it as skin. Easy peasy, and that's that. And that's all we can actually do on the guy himself. It doesn't look like much, but it is important, probably. Right, now we're going to do the gun. Right, hopefully what I might do is I might pick up the camera and just set it down to one side, and then maybe we can just have a look at what we're doing. So, as I said earlier, we're going to be using this left-handed gun and this right-handed arm. And as you can see on them, there is a very large amount of flesh. There's no clothing on them, there's no wrist straps, no gloves, no anything like that. So doing them will require a lot of green. Hopefully I can keep still long enough to make this work. There we go. Alright, let's rock on. And my left-handedness is coming back to bite me again, because it's in the shade. You do need to be relatively careful with this section, because there is a lot of areas that might be inaccessible later, particularly when you glue it on. The whole back area of the arm is inaccessible, though still possibly visible, which will make it an absolute bleeding nightmare if you missed a bit. So you've got to be really careful you don't, well, miss a bit. Right, flip it over and rock on. Again, this is the joint, don't paint on it. And the other thing, you may be able to see that there are like fingernails or claws on the orcs. So again, you've got to be careful not, because if you paint those, they become very hard to spot later when you go to paint them in their actual colour. So make sure you're careful when you paint those, that you don't paint the fingers, because, well, they just become a pain in the butt to spot later. Got to get around the bottom. Check it, 360 degrees. Looks like we're okay. Yeah, I think we're alright. I think we've got it all. And then we're going to do the arm, which is just there. I'll get some more paint. Bum, 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 ba-dum. Ba-dum, bum, ba-dum, bum.
Now, using Dark Angel's green, or whatever it's now called in the updated version, because it's really dark, and also when you wash it, it goes just... It seems to me that it goes a little bit almost lighter. I could be wrong, maybe that's just my eyesight, but they seem to go... The tone doesn't change much, but it's enough for you to be able to do a highlight, but I don't generally highlight again with Dark Angels. I use a different green, which is why the arms are so much brighter and the skin is much brighter. And then we just check we've got the under bits. Now the only bit you can't do is in here. I'm going to paint up here because that might be visible, but all of this is holding the gun, so you don't need to go in there. I'm just going to be ultra cautious and go around the outside. Now there are no fingernails. Hopefully I can show you this. There are, not that I can see any fingernails. They've sculpted the hand really badly. Well, not badly, but there's no fingernails that show up on this arm, except this one. Meaning you can go right up to the edge when you paint it. It's up to you though. Right. So there we go. That's the green. Right. Put the frame up there. Oh, actually, forgot the head. You know, orcs have green skin, so we need to do their faces green. Forgot all about that. See, this is what happens sometimes you get distracted and you make mistakes. Now, I know there are a lot of teeth on here and there's a nose ring and everything, but I'm not going to be ultra cautious when I'm painting this. Because the green is the first step we're doing on the face, I can go back and correct it all later. Again, we're going to stay out of that central area because that's where we're going to put the glue. Got to go around the side. There's less green on this than, say, on a head like this one, but you still got to do it. It's harder to highlight as well because the helmet's in the way. And there we go. So there you go. Head's done, arms done, skin's done. Can't leave the frame there, that's where I put the camera. So we got the camera. Right, we're pretty much back where we were. I'm going to seal that. I'll leave that in there in a second. Okay, let me just make sure the camera is back set how we want it. Yep, that's fine by me. I do apologise for the constant change in lighting. I find it impossible. This is the best surface I have to paint on. It's the largest area I have, and unfortunately my window is over there. Meaning that the sunlight is coming through in this direction. Meaning that it's very hard for me to not put my models in shadow when I paint them. And that's obviously impacting on you guys. So, the next colour we're going to do, and it's the last major colour we have to do on the body itself, is the red. And the red we use, Mephiston Red. Formerly known as Mechrite Red for those who work in old colours, and it's all good. This red has been the red that I've used for all my models for all of the years because it works really, really well. It was in the starter set, which is probably why the first ever painting starter set I got was using Mechrite Red, so it's just the red I stuck with. Now there's not much red to do on these guys. They don't wear heavy armour or armour plating, and so getting the little bits of red that there are doesn't take very, very long. The only reason I'm doing extra red on this one is because of the tabard. That goes on there. There's a big plate on his back, which hopefully you can see. What I found with red is that it basically goes with everything. There are very few colours that you can't paint and have a contrast with red. Because, well, red just goes. It stands out really well against the brown, it stands out really well against the purple. It just works really well. And I'm also going to do this ammo cache, these supply bags, in that colour. I don't know why, I just have a thing where I think it works best to have every individual colour stand out, and I've actually missed a bit of brown, which is really annoying. Oops. Oopsie daisy, my bad. There we go. Right. Hold you there, and paint you.
To be fair, this ammo pack is actually an optional extra on the frame. I've actually attached it as an extra. It does make things awkward at times, like trying to paint the brown for the belt. It was a bit more annoying because I had this component in place, but it's no big deal. I'm going to paint the strap in a white, just again for some more contrast. I like colours that contrast well with each other, and please don't stick to my finger. Last thing, turn this guy around, is to paint the tabard on the front of there. Let's try and use our right hand. I've never painted right-handed for a reason. Yep, and then turn him around, flip him over. There's a bit up here that we need to do. And there we go. That's that. Okay. Now, I'm going to do the gun with a little bit of red on it, but to be honest, you don't need to. This is just personal preference, and I found that with the gun casings, like this area down here, I like doing that in an alternate colour. Just because too much silver, to me, not my favourite thing in the world. Right. Let's get some paint, get it on the brush. I'm not really down here for long, just working on this. Segment, turn it over. Now you will notice when you clip the model out of the frame, which is obviously something you have to do later, that you will get bits that aren't done. Purely because, well, you couldn't get to them because there was a frame in the way. It's a pain, and it's an easily addressable one, and we're going to just do this little piece here, and then we're going to move on. Most of it you will do in silver. I've seen people do the ammo drums in different colour. I'm going to leave it alone. I'm just going to leave that like that. It's not as much red on these guys as you could do. Like, for example, a lot of people who would do things would get their clan colour on the cloth rather than on the armour. It's just something I've never done. It's not a hard and fast rule. It's just the way I like to do it is to have the armour denote where your clan comes from, not your clothing. Because to be honest, orcs will wear just about any sort of scrap cloth they can get their hands on. Even if in the Evil Sun's case, they probably just daub it in blood and move on. Right. Okay. The last major element of all things is basically the silver. And I use Ironbreaker, formerly known as Chainmail. Now, some might be saying, well, why the hell are you not using Lead Belcher, which is formerly bolt gun metal? Simple reason, it's really, really dark. I used to find when I used bolt gun metal on models that it just didn't stand out. It might work better on non-undercoated models or on white undercoated models, but on black undercoat, which is what I used to use, just no. You just got no appearance at all. It's like you hadn't done anything. The chainmail was the way to make it stand out. And the honest thing I will say is you will probably have to wash it back down again, which is something I'm probably going to have to do on this guy, is to wash him back down. There's not much silver on the orc again. There's a belt buckle, which you probably wouldn't be able to see even if I had perfect lighting. It's an absolute pain in the butt spot. Just there. You can also try and do some of these little, I want to call them staples that hold all the doodads together. And they probably take as much time as anything else to do. I can't see any more. There's a couple of bullets on this backpack. I'm going to paint those, and I'll go into the shadow again. I'm a derp. And also, all orcs have steel toe caps. You may not have noticed this, but they all have steel toe caps. Or at least I think they all have steel toe caps. Well, I think they should all have steel toe caps because, well, kicking people in the face when they're down. You know, because orcs. And that's the only battle you need to do on this guy. Oh, shoot, I've missed a huge amount of red on this. Oops. I derped. Right, let's get this gun done, and then I'm just going to take a break for 5 minutes, get a drink. Talking for an extended period of time without a drink is probably a mistake. Right, I'm actually going to move the camera again. So.
And again, just like with everything else, the red contrasts really well with the silver, I found. It does contrast really, really nicely with everything. It's really good with green, red, silver, good set of contrast colours. I also use ice blue quite a lot, or what was formerly ice blue. I think it's definitely obviously changed the name now. But I use that a lot on a lot of models. I've got an knob up here. I'll just fish them out. And you can see, if I put them in front, that the blue, the red, the purple, the green, they all contrast really well with one another. And I find that, especially with models like Orks, you can afford to be a little bit garish and use a lot of bright colour contrasts because, well, it's Orks, they don't care, or they quite like shiny things. Oops, that's gone off the camera, my apologies. You can afford to do shiny things. Although with metal, obviously metal corrodes, so give that a wash. Don't do anything on the hand, and then we just need to do any bits that we choose to do on the helmet, and I forgot to do the red on the helmet because I'm a colossal spanner. You see what happens? Like, I think this is something I'll have to learn if I do future tutorials, is that I get distracted ridiculously easily. Really easily. I just dropped all of the frames there. I'm an idiot. So I'm going to set the camera back up. And this is the thing, I get distracted so easily by 1,000,001 different things. And you can't afford to do that. Look, you see, you really got to push that thing down. You remember I mentioned earlier, you've really got to push them down to get them to sit flat. Yeah, my easy distractingness means that I forget to do things very, very often. And that's why I often have to record videos in multiple takes. That's why this happens and I end up missing components. So I'm going to pause the video, get a drink, fill in all the gaps that I've missed, and then we'll come back and finish him off. Okay, we've done it. We fixed it up. Apologies for the mistakes I must have been making throughout that, and probably some of you were screaming mentally about what the hell are you doing missing all the bits, but I have now fixed it. Gone around, painted around all the extra bits that I realised I'd missed, filled in some gaps, and also sorted out the helmet, which is sat here. Just sat here, and now it is done. It's red. So you can see that, it's red. That was the main thing I needed to do, and it's done. Apologies for the mistakes. Normally I'm not this messy, but I must obviously be getting used to filming it. Right, here we go. So, the only colour really left to do before we stick them all together is the white, well, grey. I use Astronomican grey. I do have its newer version, Celestra grey. The problem with Celestra grey is that it's split, meaning that it is watery and completely unusable. So I can't use it. Astronomican grey doesn't do that. Well, it hasn't done it to me. So I'm using that. There's not a lot to do with the Astronomican grey. It's mostly teeth and any other bits that you fancy doing in that colour. There's not much really, but still needs to be done. And I've put the pot to shade the model. That wasn't very clever of me. Still learning my way around painting. One thing you will notice with this paint is that if you go straight in, you get a darker grey than if you do what I do, which is go underneath the tongue, or you go out of the lid itself. Because out of the lid, you actually get an actually brighter tone. And that's why I do it up there, because it's just brighter, and that means you get a better overall effect. Now there's not much I'm going to be doing. I'm only going to be doing a couple of little bits, and again I'm shading it. Right, let me just quickly work out how I'm going to do this. You see how bright that actually comes out? You can see it's really, really bright. It's really easy to spot, which is something I think to be a good thing. Again, you probably might want to use a darker thing if you're doing it on most models, but I just think for these guys it works fine. Right, so we're going to check the weapon, and we're going to check the hand, and there's nothing he's doing. The only thing to do is the head, and we're going to go this way this time. I've decided we're going to go this way. Because, well, reasons. The head doesn't have much to do. It's got more to do than actually most others, in that you have the teeth, but you also have this rim on the helmet, which is something you haven't got on the majority of models. So let's get on with it. This is the main reason I actually use it in the brighter tone, is because it makes the teeth stand out a little better. Just let me do that. Find it easier, as I said earlier, to just rest the model or your hand or the frame on something, just to make your life 10, 50 million times easier. There we go. See? Sticks out way, way better. You can be probably using a yellow effect. Some people do use a yellow effect to do the teeth, to show that they're rotting a bit, but I have never been able to do that. It's never been a trick I've been able to execute to any degree of skill or certainty. Check it. That's all done. Yeah, sorry. Realize I've got to try and keep talking, otherwise people get very, very bored probably. There we go. That just helps the model have another extra dimension to it. It sticks out now quite well. And we are now in a position to put the whole thing together. Right, so let's do that. Let's put the model together. You go in that, right. Do next, obviously, is to get the components out of the box, out of the frames. So, and as I mentioned earlier, you may be able to see that there is a little area where the frame has been clipped out, but with the highlights and the washes you'll do, you may actually get away with it. Let's clip the other arm out. And we're going to leave that there, and I'm going to get the head. Boop. And boop. There you go. There's all your components. Now when you're going together, the gun is the first thing you glue. I mentioned earlier why the head was off, and the head was off to stop it obstructing the gun. So we're going to glue the gun first. Now there are 2 or 3 different ways you can do it. The way I usually do it is I glue the 2 joints on the arm, there and there, and I also put glue there. Now I know that this area is painted, but I find I could have painted that as well, but it's really just about making sure it stays in place, and it doesn't have to be absolutely secure, unlike the 2 that go to the arm. It's just because when the arm's dry, they'll be in the right place anyway. So we apply some glue to the 3 areas. Put the glue down, and then we put the bugger together. Apologies, I'm doing this off camera. I'm trying not to, but sometimes I like just having the model in my hand a certain way. And there we go. Stuck together. It goes together really ridiculously easily. I mean, that's the easiest I've ever got one of these guys to go together. But it went together really, really quickly. And boom. Last thing, get the head in place, and then we're done. So, just going to put some glue onto the head, just into that gap that we left clear back here. Because Orks are so leaned forward that you often end up just sitting the head on the gap as much as pushing it onto it. And there we go. One assembled Ork Shoota Boy. Now he's not quite finished, because we still have washes, we still have highlights that we can do. But I'm just going to let the glue dry, and then we'll come back and we'll finish him off. Right, okay, the glue is dry. The model is now stuck together. And we're going to do 1 wash, and then we're going to do the highlight on the skin. You can go further than that, but just for the purposes of getting models out quickly, this is all you really need to do. The wash we're going to use, Badab Black, now known as Nuln Oil. I do actually know that one. You see what I mean here about the gaps forming? Yeah. The washes are really, really good. They actually are such an expedient, a speed up. There we go. I've probably put too much on, but you can afford to be liberal with a wash. You're going to be going ham on it, so
probably should wipe off the excess, but you don't need to overdo. Right, okay. Let's get you done. We're going to do the flesh. Do the 2 areas of arm, because you're highlighting those. We're also going to wash the gun. Simple reason I know people are going to be screaming that gun is too bright, so we're going to wash the gun. You don't have to wash the gun, but I think for orcs you probably should. I used to have a brown wash. It's now known as Agrax Earthshade. When I had it, it was called Devil and Mud, and it worked really well as a wash to make him look a bit dirtier, as well as just dull the colour. We're also going to wash the white around here, because at the moment it's too bright. It allows you to pick out highlights if you want to dry brush it later. But you don't even need to do that dry brush because it already looks a damn sight better. And that's all we're going to really need to wash, though I'm also going to do the whole area on his back. I'm going to do the armour, face. I mean, that's got the worst of it washed. That's done all it needs to do to just dull some of the colour down and make the green ready for highlighting. You can see already like the wash seeps into cracks, which I'm hoping you can see. It just makes the white stand out a lot better, and it's probably the only real essential for the job. Right, there we go. Wash also takes a minute or two to dry. It sometimes needs to take a while, because with wash, because it's so watery, if you go and then paint straight over the wash, you sort of half take it off. Right, just do that. Right, so there we go. Now, what we're going to do, just to finish off the model, is the last stage I do with these guys, is a highlight on the skin. And we're going to use Knarloc Green. Again, I'll put the comparison in the description if you need to check. And that's what takes the skin from what you see there to what you see there. It really brightens it up, but it also allows you to keep the recesses with the Wash Dark Angels Green, keep everything toned out, and allows you to show off the defined muscle that is the orc. Despite being strength 3, they are an absolute lump of muscle. Okay. I also have something I can do for the base, and I'm going to do it on this model. I haven't on all of them, but I will do when I finish the squad. And that is a texture. I'm going to do a sand texture on the base with Armageddon Dust, just to help define it. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned throughout this whole video is the fact that I'm using quite a thick brush. It's not the finest precision brush on the planet, but I found that if you keep it straight using the palm thing I talked about earlier, it can do precise detail as long as you're careful with it. So really, it's down to you to make sure the brush is straight. Plus, it allows you to cover larger areas faster. You do have some bigger brushes. There are some sat on my paint station that I use for really big models, but they don't all fit in the paint pot. Sod's bloody law, I know. Right, we're going to move you back there, and we're going to do this green highlight. This, again, has been a mainstay of my stuff for years. Still the same pot. It's got yellow paint on it that someone put on there because they're an idiot. They were being a bit of a spang back then. We were all idiots back in our youth. What can I say? Here we go. Right. And when we're doing this highlight, we are basically going over all the raised areas. You could treat this as dry brushing, but that doesn't get quite the same effect. I think the technique they use is overbrushing, is the name of it. And you just go over all the raised areas. You stay out of the recess. You just stroke the brush over those raised areas. As you can see already, it allows you to pick out the detail and make the highlight worthwhile. I often do most of the hand with the overbrush. You can just look at his arm. You can see there's darker areas now, there's lighter areas. Go under here, highlight under here. And this is where it becomes really useful, is the fingers. If you're really careful, you can just highlight the tops of the fingers. You can resort to dry brushing if you wish. I've probably got to a stage where I'm just dry brushing and really, I can't get the hand in the right position. And there you go, that just helps pick out the detail. We're going to do the same on the face. But with the face, you need to be a little bit more OTT. You may as well just try and paint most of the face over the eye area, just to help it stand out, because you've got to make sure the face is still the focal point. And there you go. That's highlighted up, and the model itself is now just about complete. Oh, actually, if I just try and pin him in place, I'm gonna do all that. There we go. There we go. Often you find yourself going back on yourself and checking things second 2-3 times. That's why sometimes you need to do 2 coats, like I've done with a couple of areas, because I've had to do them twice. And there you go. He's now finished. I'm just going to do the texture on the base. Now, texture paints are weird. They have a very weird consistency, which means that they always obviously leave a textured effect, hence the name. They do look cool, I have to say. I don't have one to hand, but they do have quite a nice effect, and they have a rough, coarse feel, so they often make a good desert base. I used to just paint the bases yellow, but that never quite worked as well. Right. Thing I will say is, if you can keep your brush wet, but not soaking wet, the textures work alright. If you get your brush too wet, then the texture runs a little bit. It's not quite as good. Right. You might have a look inside. You can see it's coarser than a standard paint. You can see it responds a bit when you move your brush around in it. And you might be able to see like coarse, prickly effect. I know the camera seems to be on a nice setting at the moment where it's not too blurry, but you've got to keep it out of focus, right? And then we just paint over the base. Spiky helmet stab you. Good lesson to learn. Spiky helmet stab you. Hold him down. I really need to spin this guy around. I'm sorry guys, I need to spin him around so I can get at it. And try and keep it in the light. Okay, I need to pick him up. Apologies, I don't know how to take him out of the camera line here. Right, well there you go. That's now just about based. Now obviously some people would advise against texture paints. Some people use modelling sand, some people use hobby grass, some people use other clever things to make it work really, really well. But if you're trying to get them out again en masse and you want it to be fully based, a texture paint is the fastest way. Because modelling sand is a pain in the butt at times. Right, that's sealed, that's away. And there you go. So there you go, that's one Ork Shoota Boy fully painted. So how we've done it, just as a reminder, we've done Dark Angel's green skin, we've done Liche purple for the clothing, Mechrite or Mephiston Red armour, Dark Flesh, Snakebite leather, not Snakebite leather, Steel Legion Drab, Astronomican grey, a Nuln oil wash, and then a Knarloc green highlight Armageddon dust texture. Dead simple really, and it will allow you to get models like these out quickly. I know this video has taken longer. It's taken about 45-50 minutes, but that's mainly because I've been trying to work around with the camera and that's slowed me down a bit. But you can get these guys done probably in half an hour, which is really, really good once you get into a rhythm and get into a technique. The other way to do them is to do it by batch painting, but I find doing them with a guy at a time sometimes it's easier than batch painting because you can keep track of all your components, who's going where, doing what. Piece of advice also, when you're painting on the frame, paint them one thing at a time. You might notice I haven't done any more weapons or on any more of the guys, because if I started painting all the guns at once, how am I going to keep track of who's going on which guy? It just helps me keep track of them paired up, arm and gun. But that's just me. So there you have it. That is the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. I know it wasn't perfect, but I hope you found it useful nevertheless. Make sure to leave any suggestions for future painting tutorials, mainly advice really, so I know what I'm doing a little bit better for future videos. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Michael for Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again.